Hello, and welcome to Euraxess Smart Talks.
The Smart Talks podcast series is an EU-funded Euraxess project which provides information and assistance to researchers at any career stage.
Euraxess supports the EU research area in its ambition to create a single borderless market for research, innovation and technology in the EU.
We support researchers in mobility, careers within and outside academia, innovation and entrepreneurship.
We strive to increase scientific collaboration between Europe and the world. Hi, I'm Daria, a senior expert at Euraxess National Contact Point in Latvia.
And I'm Jovan, a teaching and research assistant from the Faculty of Mechanical Engineering in Niš, Serbia.
And you are listening to the Euraxess Smart Talks podcast.
I would like to welcome Professor Anne-Marie-Therese Jeannet. She is the principal investigator of the Deindustrializing Societies and Political Consequences DESPO project funded by the ERC Starting Grant starting in 2020 and ending in 2025. She is an associate professor of sociology at the University of Milan and studies how changes in the social structure such as deindustrialization or immigration alter political life.
She is interested in how the public perceives these social phenomena and the role of the social-political context in shaping the public's response to these occurrences, and is also affiliated with the Dundena Center for Social Dynamics and Public Policy, Bocconi University. Hello, Anna. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
So tell us, please, about your discipline, just a short introduction of how you decided to be a social scientist and actually a scientist at all.
Oh, okay. So I did not get my undergraduate degree in social science. I come from the humanities, so I studied history. And when I went back for my master's at the London School of Economics, I got a master's in public policy, and it was a kind of general degree which had a lot of social sciences. And I began to be interested in the way that statistical analysis could convince people and be used also with rhetoric to try to empirical analysis, which was something that I hadn't really been trained in. So it was a slow process. I think that I probably was a social scientist before I realized it, because I really enjoy observing people, observing societies, making comparisons, even as a child. And so it came very naturally to me to realize that this was a science of sorts, and that I really appreciate the empirical positivist way to do it. I like the procedural way of doing things rather than an interpretive way. Almost like a scientist studying under a microscope has a procedure. We have a procedure. And this is the part that I like, because I like to study things through this detached way, because I feel like that's like a little bit of the most interesting way of studying people. Yeah.
And considering the ERC grant, how did you apply for it? Did you hear about it from a senior colleague on a webinar or somewhere else?
So at the time, I was a postdoc at Bocconi University, and there weren't many. They had several professors who had ERC grants. And I did not think of myself as someone who might win it at the beginning. I had just gotten a PhD, and it seemed like people who won it were rarely ever a postdoc. They were maybe in an advanced career, or even those who won the starting grants. They seemed to already have a position. And I just thought I would apply for some smaller funds, and I applied for other schemes, but I was rejected from all of them.
And very nice.
Yes. But yet I was very determined about my project. So every time it would get rejected, I would just work on the proposal more and more, and the idea got better. So it wasn't that it was the same proposal that I presented everywhere. I really worked on it a lot and improved it each time. And finally, the last scheme that I could possibly apply for was this starting grant. And I just thought that my objective was to be invited to the interview because I thought that this would signal quality. It would give me some confidence in my research. So, yeah, then I was invited to the interview and then I wanted to win. But the first objective was really this personal objective. So, yeah, it really arrived to it. I knew about it, but this is also why I speak so openly about this because I think a lot of junior scholars don't try because they think that it's something for more experienced people and they don't have the journal publication that they're expecting, etc. So it's really important that people consider themselves to be contenders before the process. And I think that's one of the reasons I speak about it.
And that's a blessing in disguise in a sense, because if you managed to pass the previous streams to which you applied, you would have never gotten into the ERC grant project.
Yeah, and actually, at the time of the ERC, I won another grant for.
Oh,
You see?
It kind of, I think all the hard work paid off the persistence. So there must have been something very good about the project. It was more that it needed, I think it wasn't so much, it needed time. I always say this when people apply. It takes time to, it's like it needs to be in the oven a long time before it's ready to come out. And so, yeah, I was getting rejected, but it was still like cooking in the oven. So then when I finally sent to the ERC, it was the best version of what I've been working on. And I had been working on it for more than a year and a half.
that
So,
also happens a lot with scientific papers, at least in my experience,
yeah.
because the first version you write, even if it's the final one with everything presented, is never the best one. Usually, when you rewrite it, that's the
Yeah.
one that is for publishing.
And sometimes people say in the scientific papers, like, I'm grateful for the anonymous reviewers, and it seems like a formality, but I think we are kind of grateful because if we look back at that first version, it really wasn't that good as the version that ends up getting published, thank goodness. So it doesn't feel comfortable and it's not fun when we're doing it. If kind of we get a little demoralized, but the fact that I just usually separate the personal aspect from the scientific aspect. The science does get better because of these like it does improve science that we have these things. So.
Thanks to torturers. Special. So let's talk about gaps. What is more important, gap or research topic or research idea? And what you think is more important for applying for the grant, for example?
Yeah.
Something could be more important for the paper, something for the grant, something for just your project, or maybe can you elaborate a little bit on these differences?
My philosophy for ERC. So for paper, a gap is fine, and it's okay, and
Even if nobody cares.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it's from what my understanding is of the criteria. I mean, I'm not an evaluator. I've just been someone who's won it. Is that's not sufficient to win it. So I like to tell people, don't think of gaps. Think of avenues, new avenues. Think of big, giant paths that you're opening up, not little gaps that you fill. And so the gap, I think and don't think about topics, think of ideas. So it's not enough to say, okay, there's this topic that's understudied, or there's this topic that's understudied in this place, or whatever. Those things could be good research papers, but they won't form an ERC idea. And so it has to be almost like this entire area of way of thinking about something that hasn't been thought of. And I'll just give a concrete example from my project. So I studied deindustrialization and politics. And until my project came along, or at least this is how I positioned it, was that we always thought that the political consequences of deindustrialization was through work, like workers lost their job or people were facing unemployment, so they were angry. And my mechanism said that actually it's changing politics through family and through community. So it was like these other channels that we were, and I was saying by just thinking about jobs and work and the economic channel, we're missing the whole picture because we're not thinking about family channels and community channels. So we're underestimating the impact of this social change because we're missing, it's like seeing 20% of the picture and we're missing like 80%. this is just an example. And so that also helps you have urgency because they have a lot of good projects. And so you have to kind of convey, is so important to fund my project. So if you have this whole way of thinking about something in a new way, you can kind of convey, if we don't start thinking about it in this way, science will be limited. Our scientific understanding of this entire thing will be limited, short-sighted, misunderstood, etc. So that's how I built this case. So it wasn't about a gap.
Your research is very interesting, especially in the current political situation concerning America. Tariffs, a way to prevent, as the US president says, the industrialization. And concerning this and other impairments to the industrial manufacturing process, like COVID, that happened during your project realization, would you say that it was successfully realized, or did you have any deviations from your original plan?
I had many, you mean my project? I had
Yep.
many deviations. Besides the political changes, this was fine. That wasn't really a risk in the sense of just made, COVID was a risk because everyone started to research COVID, even sociologists. And everyone, there was 2 years where people didn't want to, we're just focused on that. But the main thing that happened was that the central hypothesis of the project did not hold. This is so important to talk about this, because if you're going to do something new, then you have to be exploratory. So you have a central hypothesis. The central hypothesis was that community level deindustrialization, or just community level changes annually at the local level, would predict political changes in voting and different kinds of attitudes. We have, over the long run, we looked at 50 years, we looked at all the counties in the United States, and we found no relationship, which is the central idea of the project. And that's a real big challenge in science because of publication bias. So there's a bias for significant, statistically significant results. Of course, we presented it as an interesting finding, given that most people think that, left behind places deindustrialize, and that's why people vote in a certain way and everything. But this allowed me to think about really important things, which is the relationship with citizens have with time. So I said, I think that there is a relationship between deindustrialization and politics, but I think the problem is this idea of measuring the annual level. That the annual level is sort of meaningless to the normal citizen because they are living as an accumulation of their own past. So the things that they remember, the jobs that their dad did, the jobs that their grandpa did, the way that their little town used to be, the way that their parents told them that the little town used to be. And they are also at the same time imagining and uncertain about the future. So maybe their industrial amount is fine today, but they know the general picture and they're worried about the jobs tomorrow, even if the numbers are fine. So it became much more clear to me that I needed to study different temporalities of time, the past and the future, not only just this annual present amount. It's not like GDP per capita, right? That's kind of where I was approaching it too much through this economics lens. So I ended up taking a total deviation in part of the project. So we continued on. We will publish these findings. It's not really, but we went down the new avenue where we began the study of nostalgia for this whole thing with industrial nostalgia. And this was very, very meaningful and important because we found that people are highly nostalgic for factory work, even though they don't want to work factory jobs. There's actually an article in the Financial Times about this over the weekend from a journalistic perspective. It's a really interesting paradox, right? And so nobody really wants to work on the factory line, yet they want those jobs to exist for their compatriots. And so we're going to go further into this. So we were approaching the issue in such a logical way, but we were not understanding the paradox, the complexities, the way that citizens actually experience this social change, which is not just like how much industrial production is there in my local area, like in this annual year. It's not like that. So this is kind of how we went away from this approach, but we had to go down a different path during the project, and this wasn't planned.
This is very interesting. It makes me think, and as I am a co-host of this podcast, I have the freedom to ask you whatever I want. So, have you considered that media are also very much influencing how people are constructing their past and present, actually, as well?
Yeah, because so this is I'm reading a book at the moment. It's called "The Past is a Foreign Country."
Yeah.
It's a really fun book. So basically, the way we remember the past is a social construction. Like we
Yeah.
have these ideas of past that were glorious, like the Victorian times, which are very different than the way we remember them, or the 1950s. Some people have written about the 1950s in family, called "The Way We Never Were." And this is very important, that often we develop romanticized versions of the past. And I think what we can see in the media depiction is that factory work, while it might have had benefits, it also had enormous risks and difficulties. And like, it's really interesting that this is where it's gotten really romanticized. And then obviously politicized because of that. But yeah, as you can see, it's a very these are very, very powerful images.
Yeah, but let's talk about deviations. So, your current interest, you are not going finalize your project this year. Do I understand correctly?
I have one more year, so I'll go until April 2026.
Okay, and this is okay for ERC. I mean, just in case if we are talking for someone who is thinking about applying, so this is okay if you have any deviations, and this year you are allowed to take.
So that's a great question, because it's important to understand. So it's not like a Horizon 2020. I am also involved in a project like that, where you really just have to deliver what you said you were going to deliver.
Yeah.
There is, however, a contract at the beginning of the project where you say, I'm going to do all these things. It's basically your project proposal.
Yeah.
And then every year you have scientific reports, and so you have to say what you did, whether you are on track or no, and the risks and all this stuff. But I actually, when I applied for this extension, I did a full-on amendment. This is like this process where you basically revise the legal contract of what you're obliged to. And so there was a scientific explanation that I had, but I basically, in some places where I decided not to go collect data because the hypothesis wasn't holding, I wasn't going to go, because my hypothesis didn't hold in the United States. I didn't see the reason to go to Germany to test it, because that would just be, the science wasn't pointing us in that direction, but the science was pointing to us this direction about thinking about the past and the future. And so I was going to use the money and the to do a new avenue. But I wrote it into this contract. I basically rewrote an amendment with the ERC where I explained line by line every little detail of my proposal and the change. And I added the things, not just from a budget perspective, from a legal contract perspective. And then they take about 2 months and they approve it. But that's really important, because you could get to the end of the project and the scientific officer like, what did you do here? Like, so transparency in communication, both through the scientific reporting, but also through amendments, is so important, because then basically you're not legally obliged to do what you said you were going to do. So I've been very cautious about this. Um, uh, Things like I couldn't find we had some problems accessing some micro census American data, because you had to go to the United States, you had to be an American citizen, which I am. But if you hadn't been an American citizen and haven't lived in the United States for a series of time, you couldn't access the data. All these little details that we didn't know before we tried. And so I had to find different data. So I put everything in the change, in the amendment. And I've been told by others, and with this institutional support, administrative support, of course, but this is important to understand.
Talking about support as an early career researcher, I would like to know: are there any suggestions regarding ERC projects in order to be successful, in order to get them and uh, deliver what you promise to deliver, or be able to accommodate for any changes as you did when the situation changes? Because in science we can never predict the outcome. We can start with a hypothesis, but along the way it can change, and it
Yeah,
often does.
in the project proposal process support. I got support. I didn't feel like support at the time, but I was at an institution where there were ERC winners. And they're very busy professors. When a junior person comes and wants to apply for a starting grant, the chances of getting it are small. And so, and they're very busy with their things. So it's not like they're going to hold your hand and and give you really detailed feedback on the proposal. I think that's very rare. I try to do that with junior people now because I think that that's helpful, but it's still rare. So I had a couple people that read my abstract, including a professor from which I'm very grateful, because he said, "Oh, your first sentence is just so boring. I don't even want to keep reading." And I said, "What?" And he said, "It's really important. Your first sentence is so boring. You must absolutely change it." So I spent, I think, a day revising my first sentence. Probably was good advice, because that was very direct. Then when I got the interview, I had the institution do me like a mock interview. And I know that many institutions do that. That's absolutely very important. And some of the people doing the mock interview had done an ERC interview. So this was also so important. So people who have been through the process and won are like very important resources. And that's also why I continue to talk, because it's unlike any kind of other competition. So I also had a person that had won a starting grant who explained to me his lengthy process. He was he's a historian, a very, very attentive person to every detail. He had revised his proposal 12 times or something like this. And so I listened to him and I learned from him. So talking to other um, winners, if you're at an institution where no one has won, go at a conference, try to talk to someone who's won. Usually we are pretty approachable and like talk about it. I think that's my general experience. And then there is, of course, the support once you win the grant. Administrative support is important, and the institution. I mean, usually most institutions are very pleased to get the grant. So my experience has been very positive. Um, I'll just share maybe something. I don't know if you've thought about this, but there's this portability. So I applied to the institution where I was a postdoc, and I was not offered a position there because they're a private university and they don't do it like that. But I was offered a position at the public university because there's a national law regarding this, University of Milano. And so I started the grant at a new institution. And that's really challenging because you have young researchers that come to work for you, but you don't know your colleagues. You can't really introduce them to the institution because you barely know it yourself. I've flagged this also to the ERC in the feedback to them, just as something to think about. Just not that I don't think portability is important, but I think there has to be some kind of extra support. Whether it's also one of the reasons I think I had to ask for an extension in the end, because besides 2020 was when I started my project, there was COVID and all this stuff. I had to teach new courses, invent all the new courses. I had to meet new colleagues, learn a new institution. And I think if you're just at the same place, it would go a lot faster. If you're, I don't know, a consolidate or advanced grant that's just been at your institution for a long time, you've got your courses, you've got your colleagues, you know at the place, you know how things work, you can fly. But for a starting grant, a lot of times people use it as an instrument for portability. which is good, but I think that it's important to account that will mean that the project will go slower in the beginning because you have to do all those other things.
Thank you very much, Anna-Marie. It was really good because we like to highlight also challenges because, people shouldn't think that everything is just flowers and everything is easy. And it's not only about getting a grant, it's also about all this additional burden of different things that is upon you afterwards. So thank you very much. That was really inspiring. And we wish you a great success with your project.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Euraxess Smart Talks podcast.
We hope that you enjoyed this episode and can't wait to share more with you next time.
You can follow us and find more episodes on the Euraxess portal, our social media profiles, or wherever you listen to podcasts.
This episode was prepared by hosts Daria Aksionova and Jovan Aranjelovic, editor ERC, and is dedicated in memoriam of Professor Miroslav Trajanovic.